Well, alright everybody, Apple has just finished their Scary Fast Apple event, and I wanted to kind of recap everything that came out because even though it was probably the fastest kind of keynote event that Apple's ever done, they kept it under 30 minutes and it was scary fast, thank goodness, at 8 p.m., but they did release a few things that kind of went under the radar or even completely unmentioned that I wanted to talk about, but let's get right into this video and talk about everything Apple released and what to expect with it. Real quick before we dive into the products that Apple released, I do want to give kudos because the cinematography and the way that they kind of introduced and got into this video or into this keynote was amazing. I love the kind of scary and the kind of fog and the darkness, and then Tim Cook coming out with like the all dark and muted tones, but then with the orange Apple Watch band. I really enjoyed kind of how they started to present everything. But in terms of what they actually released, Apple introduced their new M3 family of chips. So this is their new 3nm process that they actually started with the A17 Pro on the actual iPhone 15 Pro Max, and now they're bringing it to the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max. Still no M3 Ultra, which I'm sure is on the horizon eventually, but again, these are just going to be faster, they're going to be bigger, they're going to be better, or again, there's going to be more in the same footprint. So 3 nanometers, for those that aren't aware, just means that every transistor is that much smaller, going from 5 nanometers to 3 nanometers, so in the same density or in the same footprint, you can do a lot more on a per second basis or whatever the case may be, which ideally and in theory makes every single task with the GPU and CPU work that much faster and more efficiently. So that is what Apple announced to start off this entire keynote. So just to quickly read off some numbers, and again, these are kind of hard to fathom because we're talking about transistors in the billions. So with the M3, we have 25 billion transistors, the M3 Pro has 37 billion, and then the M3 Max has 92 billion transistors on that tiny little chip, which is kind of insane. So what that's going to translate to more is two main things. So obviously, yes, we're going to get a little bit better CPU. We'll have some Geekbench scores going on. We'll review the actual devices once they come in. But what that means is that the GPU performance is going to be that much better because now it supports up to 128 gigs of unified memory, which is absolutely unreal. And I think Apple's kind of now going into the kind of gaming industry and the gaming world. You know, Apple devices and Mac computers have never been known to be gaming computers. They've kind of always gone into the productivity. They've always gone into the creative side when it comes to maybe creating games and then creating videos and editing photos. But into actual gaming, it's never been their forte. And I think Apple is now getting into that frontier because they've kind of already mastered productivity. They're getting extremely powerful and efficient when it comes to creative tasks. So the next step on the horizon is going to be gaming, but gaming efficiently and gaming the Apple way, right? They don't want you to have a big kind of computer tower. They want you to be able to do it directly on your laptop with one single fan and staying efficient and staying quiet and also staying cool to the touch overall. But just to quickly go over each one of these chips, for the M3 chip, we're going to be able to go up to 8-core CPU, a 10-core GPU, and up to 24 gigs of unified storage. And then we have 12-core CPU, 18-core GPU, and 36 gigs of unified memory on the M3 Pro. And then finally, 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU, and like I mentioned earlier, 128 gigs of unified memory on that M3 Max. And then one of the biggest things that they mentioned with these new M3 chips is this idea of dynamic caching, which basically allows it to dynamically give as much or as little RAM power or usage that's needed for each individual task, both on the front end and in the background. So I think this is, again, an efficiency game. It's going to be able to kind of do more things at once while keeping kind of the minimum amount of cache needed to run stuff in the background, and then dynamically changing it whenever it needs to actually change depending on what software, what application, or whatever task you're actually doing. Now I think, yes, that kind of went over a lot of people's heads, but for the most part, it's going to be a net positive because it's going to allow you to do more efficiently without losing any progress along the way. So now that we have a decent and general idea of the new M3 family of chips, what is Apple going to put these M3 chips in? The first thing they talked about was the new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. So we're going to have the M3, the M3 Pro, and the M3 Max MacBook Pros. Again, this is going to get a little tough to say because Max and Mac, and then MacBook Pro and M3 Pro. There's just a lot going on with this naming nomenclature, which I'm not a big fan of. I wish Apple did something a little bit different. But for the most part, the footprint of these Macs are going to be pretty identical to what we've seen since the M1 Pro and the M1 Max and even the M1 Ultra. But some of the things to kind of take note of is we do get up to 8 terabytes of storage. Again, like I mentioned, 128 gigs of unified memory. They are saying up to 22 hours of battery life, which is industry leading. And that's one thing to say about Apple. They are very efficient with their M series chips, and they have been ever since they have been released. We still get that beautiful XDR display, or that liquid retina XDR display. We get that 6 speaker system. 2 display sizes, like I mentioned, the 14 and the 16-inch. We still get MagSafe, which is on there. We get HDMI ports, the SD card reader, the USB-C and Thunderbolt ports. You also get Touch ID, of course, and then obviously you get a fan in there, which is supposed to help with all the cooling, the rendering, and the efficiencies of keeping everything thermally cool the entire time that you're using it. And then one actual new hardware development in this new MacBook Pros is the fact that we now are getting a space black version. So this is going to be kind of like a matte black version, the darkest color that we've seen since that OG black MacBook. If you guys remember, I believe that was back in like 2006 to 2008. I remember I really wanted those back in the day. I never ended up getting one, but I think that's the kind of color we're going to get. And again, Apple's talking about how they made this black colorway with the iodized aluminum and the way that they manufactured it and this and that. At the end of the day, it's just going to be a really nice color alternative that we've had compared to the last year's color, which was space gray and that silvery color, and those two colors are still going to be available, as well as a space black one, again, only in the 14 and 16 inch ones. One thing that kind of went under the radar and unnoticed is that with the releases of these new MacBook Pros, because we are getting an M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max, is that Apple is discontinuing the Touch Bar MacBook Pro. So if you guys go on Apple's website, Apple didn't say this or anything, they just completely dropped the Touch Bar MacBook Pro from the website, at least here in the US. Maybe you're in a different country and maybe they're still available in that country, but in the US, they completely dropped the Touch Bar MacBook Pros. So Apple has officially discontinued the Touch Bar MacBooks completely from their MacBook line. And then the other thing, which I think is probably the headliner, it should be the headliner, is that yes, this is extremely fast. Apple's making strides with their M3 chips and their M3 family of chips, from speed, performance, efficiency, battery life. All that is amazing, but Apple is now packaging this in the 14-inch MacBook Pro starting at $1599. So Apple's not only making their devices faster and more efficient, but they're also bringing down the price, increasing the accessibility of these devices and getting this into more people's hands. Because I think Apple's, again, perfected their manufacturing process with these chipsets and with their hardware, and they're able to now, with high volume, it will decrease the price to the consumer. So for $1,600 to get yourself an M3 MacBook Pro, that's not a bad deal, especially because last year the M2 MacBook Pro started at $1999. And then when it comes to the 16-inch MacBook Pro, that one's going to start at $2499, which is the same price as last year, but the 14-inch one is going to be amazing. I think they did that because now the lineup makes a little bit more sense. You have the M1 MacBook Air, which they're still keeping around, the M2 MacBook Air at the 13, then the M2 MacBook Air at the 15-inch size, and then you go into the 14-inch $1,600 M3 MacBook Pro. So now that lineup is making a little bit more sense. Remove that Touch Bar MacBook Pro, and we're all good to go. And then lastly, Apple did reintroduce their new iMac. So the last iMac update was when Apple put their M1 chips in there, and now they're putting their M3 chips in there, and that's kind of where it stays at. Everything else is relatively the same when it comes to these iMacs, so you cannot do an M3 Pro or M3 Max iMac. You have to stick with the M3 iMac, which means only up to 24 gigs of unified memory, up to 2 terabytes of storage built in there. But they did get some nice, 2023 updates like Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3. You get that 4.5K Retina display, which is absolutely beautiful. It's brighter, it's a little bit more crisp as well. You still have the 6 speaker system, the studio quality mics, as well as that 1080p webcam, which is great. All the same colors are still there, so it comes in 7 different colors. It does include, as before, the Magic Mouse as well as the keyboard. But one thing that's kind of funny is that it's still a lightning powered accessory for both the Magic Mouse and the Magic Keyboard, which is very interesting, but that Magic Keyboard does come with Touch ID. So at the cheapest entry level point, it is $1299, and that gives you 8 gigs of RAM, which is kind of crazy. But even though like these M3 chips or these M chips are so efficient that even 8 gigs of RAM is more than enough for like a family computer that's just going to surf the web. But if you do want a little bit more, you're going to have to pay a little bit extra, of course. So in terms of availability, you can actually order these right now if you want to, and they will be available starting November 7th. So if you order it now, it should arrive November 7th. It'll be in stores on November 7th for all the devices that I did mention earlier. For me, the most intriguing one has to be that 14-inch MacBook Pro because it's a lower starting point, it's a new color, it's going to be a little bit faster than what we had before, and it's kind of like replacing two things. It's replacing the M2 Pro MacBook Pro as well as the Touch Bar MacBook Pro. It's kind of fitting kind of in the middle in between those two in my opinion, and I'm curious to see how that one sells compared to what it sold last year. But then also the iMac, like I said, did need a nice little update, and it did with the M3 chip built right in there. So that is just about going to do it for this video, everybody. Apple played it safe with this one. They stuck to their guns. They know exactly what they're good at. They've perfected the manufacturing process on the hardware side. They're making everything more efficient and more powerful at the same time. So they just did an incremental update and an internal upgrade to all their, best-selling machines, essentially, right? The iMac got an update, and we got a brand new colorway for the M3 MacBook Pro. So all in all, it was a decent event. We didn't get a new iPad Pro or an iPad Mini or an iPad Air. We didn't get any new USB-C accessories like a MagSafe battery replacement. So Apple's probably going to start releasing that stuff in Q1 of next year. I believe Apple's done for the rest of this year, unless they do some sort of press release in November, but that remains yet to be seen. But that is going to do for this video, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below what you thought of this event. Are you going to be picking any of these these items up? Are you upgrading from a previous model? Do you still have maybe an Intel MacBook Pro that you can now upgrade to an M3 MacBook Pro and see what those gains would look like? Or are you somebody that's on the bleeding edge? Do you have an M2 Ultra and you want to upgrade to that M3 Max and see if you get those performance gains that you really need at the top end? You know, I'm good for right now. I got my M2 MacBook Air, I got my M1 iPad Pro, my 15 Pro Max. I'm kind of waiting for an M3 iPad Pro to kind of upgrade this thing a little bit more, but that remains yet to be seen, and we'll get there when we get there. But that's going to do it for this video, everybody. But if you did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. If you guys want to watch some more iOS, iPadOS, or macOS videos, click on one of these right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. I'm out of here, everybody. Peace. Time to edit this thing. Leave a like.